Radar Update. My name is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a website ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian and biblical perspective. This is a warning, but it is not a prediction. I do not know the future, but things are not getting better. And we have heard the calls for peace and safety and also the Jonas sign, so we know things are quickly coming together. So much going on right now that we've covered in recent videos, and we see the warning messages keep ramping up and increase in intensity. The celestial signs in the heavens are also calling our attention to them. And right about now is when the best viewing window for the 5 visible planets starts to end. And right about now, Mercury is going to be so close to the horizon that pretty soon it'll be rather difficult for most people to see. And also with the rising sun, it'll be hard to see with the glare as well. So we've seen that celestial sign, but we see also now that it's starting to diminish to a degree. Then over the next few days, Venus, which is also not too much higher above the horizon than Mercury, will also be shorter and shorter in the amount of time that it will be the morning star before the sun arises over the horizon. On the 6th will be a celestial triangle, with the waning moon crescent and Mercury and Venus coming closely together before the sun arises. In addition to all the celestial signs, there's also the signs of Jonas that still continue. There are still whales being beached right now at an abnormal rate, which should call our attention. And we should remind ourselves constantly that the calls for peace and safety have gone out. That means sudden destruction is coming. And the sign of Jonas was the call to repent because judgment was coming. And these warnings are still going on, and we must not forget about that. There's been about 29 whale beachings this year. And they say that certain areas, they'll probably see 6 whale strandings per year. But now it's suddenly seen so many in so short amount of time. And it's happening in other places around the world too as well. Just the other day near Mumbai, a 40-foot blue whale beached itself slightly. This is happening around the world and should catch our attention that the sign of Jonas is still ringing in the world's ears. Now there's 2 numbers associated with the sign of Jonas. For most people, the number 40 automatically comes to mind, although that's associated with Nineveh. But 3 days is what he's more specifically tied to Jonas himself. But if we graphed out 40 days warning, this gives us an idea of how long this warning covers at the most. If we've heard the calls for peace and safety about sudden destruction, and we've heard the sign of Jonas, in 40 days from that sign, we need to seriously consider that something will happen either within that time frame or possibly no later than that. And the fact that we're seeing these signs repeated should make us consider that even more. Now, this particular sign of Jonas is very unique in that it involves a lot of enemy action, but it appears that it is allowed by God in conjunction with the weather events that He allows as well. So it appears to be a dual mix. The enemy knows this is the sign of Jonas, and it also seems to be a warning sign from God as well. Back on January 6th, Old Spice released a commercial where they showed a whale, man riding a whale, which was very suspicious in the timing of it happening right around the time that a lot of the whale beachings were starting. They released this commercial about a man riding on the back of a whale, with a bunch of photographers taking a picture of him. But they show the whale, and in this case it's a sperm whale apparently. They show it with a giant pair of sunglasses, and the man also puts on a pair of sunglasses, and he's blindfolded as well. And this goes with a lot of other similar attention being drawn to the eyes that we've seen lately. Being blindfolded, he can't see, but then sunglasses relate to the sun and your eyes. Again, we've seen a lot of messaging pointing to Apollyon and Horus and the same consistent messages. So it shouldn't surprise us that they're pointing to this sign of Jonas, this time frame apparently, of when Apollo, the sun god, Apollyon, the destroyer, when he's coming onto the scene. And we've seen this consistently. We've also seen it in the gods of Egypt, which is coming out pretty soon in a couple days as well too. The whole idea of the one-eyed god. And they blatantly even reinforce that it's the eye of Horus. And even the David Bowie videos that came out, the same emphasis on being blindfolded, not being able to see. But then his were interesting because he used buttons instead of sunglasses. And the buttons you could definitely tell were 4 holes, and with the threads that formed the X in the circle, the XO. which many see as the sign and the mark of the beast. Of course, there's a lot of occult influence in the media and music and all that, and David Bowie certainly knew his stuff. And of course, we see the same thing being pushed with the Marvel X-Men, with Eclipse as well. And they also emphasize and point back toward the pyramid, the illuminated pyramid. And Katy Perry did a whole thing of this as well with the Eye of Horus. But then speaking of Katy Perry, if you remember the Pepsi Super Bowl commercial that she did, this time last year when they released this commercial prior to her doing the halftime show, in this commercial, she shows off a whale. There's the sharks, but then there's also a giant inflated whale. Very suspicious. And we talked before of a lot of the symbolism back then pointing toward the future, toward this time. And here's a different shot of the whale, and notice how they have it positioned. So you have all these ideas coming together. The time machine, the manipulating of time, 666, with the sign of Jonas, the whale, in that time frame. All these are connected. And if you remember at her halftime show, she also performed her song, The Dark Horse. And she also portrayed the falling away, the rapture. And we talked about the sign of Jonas, coupled with the enemy knowing about it and being part of how it's played out. They knew this back a year ago. And some of these commercials have been made since then. They're pushing and pointing toward this time that we find ourselves on the threshold now from this next Super Bowl and a little bit beyond that, this time frame right around now during the days of redemption, because they know the sign of Jonas is pointing to this time, and they know judgment is going to happen during this time, and the falling away is going to happen during this time. And Satan has been prepping his disciples for the past year. Remember at New Year's, that is when they basically stated the stage is set and ready, and now they're just putting out a few more reminders to keep themselves ready. But this upcoming Super Bowl, Coldplay is going to be playing, and they mentioned that they're going to honor the past, present, and future at this Super Bowl. Just like Katy Perry had an emphasis on time, manipulation, and bringing someone from the past, they also have the same theme. This isn't some fad. This is being done deliberately, because what she was warning about a year ago and getting everybody ready for in conjunction with the sign of Jonas, it's now coming to play. And we find a lot of different events going to be happening very soon. And it's also coinciding with the redemption reminder, and we talked about that in our previous videos. The time of redemption is coming up. But also in a few days is a total solar eclipse on March 9th. That reminds us of other messages that the enemy has sent out lately too as well, with David Bowie's Black Star getting a lot of attention lately, pointing toward, visually it appears, this solar eclipse. And it's very interesting that they link the ideas of ancient astronauts in it as well. But if you look at the stars with this sun, if you know anything about astronomy, you'll notice certain patterns with the stars that are not natural. Namely, you'll notice that they have multiple Orions. And even you could make the argument that there's some more in there too as well. But Orion, there's only one constellation known for having 3 very prominent stars in a line. That's Orion. So to see them push this idea in this music clip in conjunction with ancient aliens is what they're pointing to is very suspicious, because the occult sees Orion and near there as the Silver Gate. They see it as a gateway, a dimensional gateway over there, a gateway to the heavens. And they're looking for someone to come from that area. And it's going to play into the Great Deception. So they're pointing at Orion for a reason, because they are expecting some activity from that area visually soon. So it shouldn't surprise us. Just a few days ago, NASA makes a big deal of, we've been transporting our new Orion crew module in our nice, slick, silver Super Guppy. And they're drawing a lot of attention to it because it's a message. Orion, there's a gateway. That's what they consider it there. And of course the Bible tells us that there are windows and doors in heaven. And even Revelation mentions the doors of heaven 2 times. There are gateways and portals to heaven. I don't know where they are. But it should catch our attention that the enemy knows something about this time and the sign of Jonas. And they know the door of heaven is going to be opening soon. So now they're doing a lot of prepping for their disciples to get them ready for it. They're expecting Lucifer, though. That's who they are expecting. And we've seen a lot of that messaging, and we've gone over that before. They are getting Satan's disciples ready for the son of perdition, the wicked one, to be revealed. He's going to come in his appointed time. What is unique about this total solar eclipse, though, is also what happens the very next day. The next day is expected to be the first day of month 1 on the Jewish calendar, basically starting the new religious calendar all over again. The prophetic year that we've been in is coming to a close in just a few days. And so it's interesting that a total solar eclipse is happening on the very same day almost, and you could take it that it's signaling the definite closure of one cycle to the next. And it's interesting that David Bowie seems to be pointing with the messaging toward that marker. And I suspect that they anticipate activity before that, though, especially when we see the sign of Jonas ending before that. And we also know that there's some prophetic implications with Purim as well, because Haman, he's an Antichrist type and figure as well. And of course the Bible does tell us that when the Antichrist comes onto the scene, he's going to be uprooting 3 nations before he signs the covenant. So we don't know when exactly he's coming, but they do seem to be pointing to this time period and expecting something to happen. And when we see 2 major calls already go out that something is going to happen this time period, we should pay attention as well. But then about mid-March is going to be the date 4 days before Passover of the triumphal entry at the Golden Gate, when Christ entered Jerusalem to become the Passover lamb. And this year it also happens to be on the spring equinox. And again, this is using a biblical calendar. And of course, Passover was a few days after that, the day of redemption, when the Passover lamb was sacrificed. And we see right now the redemption reminder. This is the Sabbath time when this reminder is given out that the half-shekel atonement money is due on the first of the year on the Jewish calendar. And we need to pay attention because this is a very important symbolic message when we consider that the warning is going out that redemption is due. And we also see a limit when it was due. We need to definitely pay attention to this time period, and especially with the sign of Jonas ending within this time period when atonement is due, when redemption is due. And what are we expecting? We are looking toward the day of redemption. With all the celestial signs going on and the peace and safety calls and the Jonas sign, it should catch our attention that we are now entering a time frame when redemption is due, and it quite possibly is going to be the time when the Redeemer will pick up and redeem who he has redeemed. And then we find right inside of this window, this redemption reminder, we find the 50th Super Bowl going on at the Golden Gate too. So the enemy seems to be pointing to this time as well. Of course, the Passover was Christ's first coming when he came and paid the price the first time. And we have heard the trumpet calls. We've seen different warnings back from the time of trumpets, and we've covered this in previous videos. So we know we are anticipating in the next event on the prophetic calendar, the shadow that is next is the Day of Atonement, which would be Christ's second coming, when he comes to redeem what he has already paid for. And Hebrews 9 tells us plainly that Christ has already paid the atonement. So when Christ comes the second time, he's picking up, he's redeeming what he has already redeemed. And the multiple events of Passover and even the days surrounding Passover with the Golden Gate entry, all that was just a shadow pointing to the larger work that Christ was doing. And we see a larger work going prophetically right now. And when Christ returns at a second coming, fulfilling and finishing out the Day of Atonement, there's going to be a lot of overlap between those two patterns because they'll finally be meeting each other. So it's very amazing that we find all these events coming together now, the peace and safety, the Jonas signs, all that coming, and the prophetic year is being closed out. The circle is being closed, so to speak. The events, shadows, and patterns from Passover as his first coming are now being met by his second coming with the atonement, with them being finished out, when he redeems and picks up and catches away who he has redeemed the first time he came. When he came the first time, he drank the cup, and now he's picking up his bride from that covenant. There's a lot of overlap between the shadows and patterns. We don't have time to study it here, but you study it. It's amazing when you consider both of these overlapping so close to each other with their fulfillments. So right now we are in between the Feast of Trumpets. We have heard the midnight cry that the bridegroom is nigh, and we should go out to meet him. We should be getting ready. We should meet him halfway, so to speak. And we see the day of redemption drawing nigh. That is the day we see approaching. We see our bridegroom, our Redeemer, approaching. That is the day we see approaching. So we must get ourselves ready. Remember, Passover is a shadow, and the events and fulfillment of it were much larger than just a few ordinances that were involved in commemoration on that day. And likewise, the Day of Atonement is just a shadow of the larger redemptive work and the atonement and ransom that was paid way back when, but is still coming to fruition in the sense of now the redemption, the actual pick up of the redeemed item is now coming to pass at his second coming. It's already been paid for in full a long time ago. Inheritance papers were written up, sealed in heaven. We were sealed into the day of redemption, the pickup, and we are now at the threshold of the pickup, so to speak. Right in the redemption window, it appears. Sealed unto the day of redemption, our day of redemption, which then picks up the marriage picture, which was started at the Passover. And just like the Exodus, there's going to be another Exodus around this time in the shadow, where he picks up his first fruits. We're going to be waved before the throne. There's a lot more could be said on this of how the different shadows and patterns are being taken to a higher level. All these are not just one-time fulfilled events. They have multiple implications of where they'll be fulfilled on a higher picture and a higher level. So much coming together right now. When we look at it just in a simplified view, just looking at the celestial signs in the heavens, when we see Venus as the morning star coming onto the scene a few days ago, and when we look at the Jewish months, when we overlay it like that, we can view them in the different segments, so to speak, of the night transitioning to day. We saw Venus, the morning star, coming onto the scene. And sailors in ancient days, when they could see Venus come up above the horizon, that told them that in just a little bit the sun would be rising. And they could chart their course off of Venus and use it as a navigational aid. It was a sign that they looked at. But it told them the dawn was coming. And we see another significant celestial sign, again drawing our eyes to Venus. But then shortly right after that, on the same day as the Super Bowl, there will be a new moon where it won't be seen. And then a few days later, it will show up in a real new moon. And that will start the 12th month. And during this time, the 12th month, is when Venus starts getting lower and lower in the horizon as the sun starts rising earlier and earlier. So we are seeing month 12 as the morning twilight time, the twinkling, the dawning time. While month 11 was the darkest night and just the morning star shining, month 12 is the transition between the darkest night to month 1 when the new year starts afresh, which would, especially with the total solar eclipse starting it off, marking in a sense the birth of a new sun when the sun comes up over the horizon afresh and anew. So month 12 is the morning twilight, the twinkling of the eye as they call it. So much going on right now with the celestial signs that should catch our attention in conjunction with the events and signs that are going on down on the earth. And there's also significant enemy action as they know something is very special about this time as well. There's the 50th Super Bowl happening at the Golden Gate. We saw last year with Katy Perry's Pepsi commercial about it starting with opening a door and gateway with the same consistent message of the aliens. And even at the Super Bowl, the idea of opening a gateway and a path for the lion, the beast, which could also be a reference to the Golden Gate as well. And then Lucifer, Prometheus coming onto the scene. They've been preparing Satan's disciples the whole year for this. So now we come to the 50th Super Bowl, and they put a big push on the silver and the gold. And even the organization committee, big emphasis on the Golden Gate and the sun. The Golden Gate Bridge itself, which is used a lot in the symbolism, is a gateway. It's a gateway to the harbor, and it's also a gateway to the city as well. So multiple layers of symbolism here. And it's Satan's counterpoint to the real Golden Gate, the one in Jerusalem, when Christ entered to the city. So now very close to the same time, we find another Golden Gate where Satan is getting his disciples ready for an entrance as well. And they're tying these two events together, especially with the gold and silver gates, which they view as portals and doorways in the heavens. And even the 2015 Economist cover pointed to this with the 50th and the football, and with the 50th breaking the veil, breaking the skin of the drum. They've been getting ready for quite a while. Then just a few days after that is the Grammy Awards with music. And Intel is already going to be doing something special at the Grammys with Lady Gaga. And just in some of the teasers that they released from it, the idea of breaking out of the cube, the Tesseract, a lot of messaging in that. But then just a few days after that is the Gods of Egypt film coming out. And we've talked about this before, where they also make a big push of the gold and silver gates as part of the return of the ancient gods from their perspective. It's really the demons and the fallen angels behind them, but they're pushing this gold and silver gate messaging right in the same time frame as the golden gate just a few days before that, with all the Egyptian motifs and symbolism reinforced with that. And one of the characters is Beck, Thief of Legend, who in their type he portrays Orion. And in a poster that they just recently released, you can see a lot of messaging of this. They are definitely pushing the whole idea of gateways and portals and stargates in connection with Orion. And they even have the character assuming the pose of Orion, coupled with Artemis. They are doing a lot of prepping of Satan's disciples for this time window, this time of redemption. They're looking at it from a completely different angle. But they know something is going to happen in this time period. And notice the tagline for the movie. The battle for eternity begins. And what is Satan going to be doing during the tribulation? Trying to take the war into heaven. And he's going to be warring and battling, but not till Revelation 12 is he going to finally be kicked out. They know all these events are about to be kicked off. And the trailer they released just the other day, they have a very quick snapshot of some type of time wheel, which alludes to Aztec calendar, Mayan calendar as well, tying into the idea of manipulating time and calendar resets. All these ideas go together. And then just a few hours after that is the Academy Awards, most known as the Oscar Awards. And yes, that is what their logo looks like. The statue in a pyramid. Surprise, surprise. This is not coincidence. Even the Oscar Award is modeled directly after Egyptian gods, with a lot of tie-in of Osiris too as well. And where do these take place? At the Kodak Theater. And we've talked about this before, where they have a giant gateway of the ancient gods, of the fallen angels. This thing is huge. You can see it even on Google Maps. And they got gigantic Babylonian lions and the fallen angels and the Babylonian gods. They got a gigantic serpent down on the floor. And it all harkens back to the Ishtar Gate, which was seen as a gateway to the gods, and it was known as the Lion's Gate because there was lions that flanked on either side. This new Gods of Egypt movie is made by Lionsgate. All this is done on purpose. And then Back to the Future, a lot of it revolved around the Lionsgate. The Lionsgate company uses the idea of clockwork to open doorways in their movie indents as well. They are telling Satan's disciples that Orion's Gate, the Stargate, the Gate of the Gods, is about to come open. And the battle is about to begin. When we look at all the messaging that they've been pointing toward just this time, just with the Super Bowl, the idea of gateways, and the sign of Jonas, and 666, and time manipulation, and Lucifer and Prometheus, and the falling away happening around this time. And then the Economist, that the veil, the skin, the membrane is about to be broken, the water is about to break. And then the same idea continuing this year too, with the idea of time, past and present. And Lady Gaga with the same idea breaking out of the Tesseract, and the silver and gold gates opening, star gates opening, the gods of Egypt returning, literally. Timed with the Academy Awards and the gateway there in Hollywood. Time framed with the total solar eclipse, which was also tied to ancient entities returning as well. A lot of enemy activity pointing to this time. And I don't think anything's going to necessarily happen on the Super Bowl, but they are using it as a marker. They expect something to happen in this time. And from all the celestial signs, we should too. That is what is calling our attention. That and what the Bible tells us to listen to. The peace and safety calls, the Jonas sign. The year is almost over. So much coming together. The world is very dark, but we see the day star rising, which tells us that there is a dawn. And when you study the Bible, you find that judgment comes at dawn. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed at dawn, and other acts of judgment happened at dawn as well. This twilight time, this twinkling of the eye time before the sun fully arises, this is the time during the redemption reminder. And with the sign of Jonas echoing in our ears, telling us that time is even shorter than that, we must be ready. The Bible tells us we will not know the day or hour, but we will see the day approaching, the day of our redemption. We will see it approaching, but he will arrive sooner than later. Matthew 25, 6-7. And at midnight there was a cry made, Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. Friend, this is what we need to be doing. Midnight has passed. We heard the cries of peace and safety at midnight, telling us that the bridegroom cometh. Are you getting ready to meet him? Are you stepping up? Are you rising up to do what you need to do so that you will shine bright when he appears? The letters to the 7 churches in the book of Revelation is what he calls his bride to be and how to prepare herself. And the barley that is easily winnowed will hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. I pray that Christ will find you ready and shining bright, because you are serving him first and highest above all else. Maranatha.